Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Let me go ahead and start this morning's briefing by addressing something that people have been asking me about in comment sections, and I'm just going to go ahead and give you the answer right front. I have nothing to say about the passing of Jesse Jackson. Truth be told, I've been saying what I thought about the man for the better part of 20 years. I'm not going to be repeating any of that here. But I will say that the subject of his passing, especially during Black History Month, the fact that's been harped on, that did get me thinking about something that is relevant. Black History Month bothers me. No, not the existence of it. There's not some Morgan Freeman stupidity here. Not even the concept of it is a problem. I like both. What bothers me about it is that we have all these white corporations and bootlick politicians and other self-interested parasites who try to use Black History Month to tug on our heartstrings. They try to use it as a means to manipulate us. You know, Dr. Ben said that you shouldn't ask for a day, you should take a day. He was telling us to be aggressively proactive in our interest and to not wait for somebody else's permission to do what we're supposed to be doing for ourselves. Black history is not something that is sanctioned by a government. Certainly not this one. They passed laws for hundreds of years to outlaw teaching Black people who we are and what we've done. Black history starts in the home, and from there expands to the people on your street and in your neighborhood and in your community. You see, that is how you express what the culture is. The practical definition of culture, by the way, is the way a particular group of people does things. That's the practical definition of culture. That's what culture means in practice. So that being the case, if we're not going to be taking any of our cues from what's taught in the schoolrooms, if we're not going to be taking our cues from sanctioned mouthpieces like Ken Burns, or from idiots like Henry Skip the Truth Gates, then exactly what is it that we are supposed to be doing when it comes to making sure that we know our history and that our history is being promoted properly? Well, I would say you should start your journey of foundational Black American history with yourself. We have a number of heroes and sheroes in our lineage, but the stories largely go unsung because the footwork of documenting and compiling that history is rarely, if ever, done. Yes, we are a people under siege, and you certainly can't downplay that. That's definitely not something that isn't there. It is true. But what's also true is not enough of us have thought enough of our own history and our own stories to actually make sure that there's a record of it. Whenever I think about an example of that, I can't help but think of Bass Reeves. You know, I had done some reading up on the story of Bass Reeves years ago, though. When I saw David Oyelowo would be playing him on TV, my eyes predictably rolled up into my head. Personally, I don't have anything against David Oyelowo necessarily, mainly because I don't know enough about him to say yay or nay. He personally just isn't important enough for me to take an interest in to the point of forming an opinion like that, but I do know that every time I look up, he's playing yet another real-life foundational Black American historical figure. From the Tuskegee Airmen to Dr. King to Bass Reeves, and word around the Jollof Bowl is he's scheming to play Joe Louis next. David Oyelowo is British, and while I don't think that he's as obnoxious as, say, John Boyega, I do think that he's making quite a career for himself out of playing people who he has no real connection to. Shouldn't he be focusing on the history of Afro-Britons like himself? But of course, when you look at Britain, what you see is the people over there have not done the groundwork of actually fighting for their representation in popular media. You see, that's the difference between us and the rest of the diaspora. We made a concerted effort to dig in our heels and make it clear we are going to not merely be here, we're also going to be seen. There is no substitute for that. I'm not trying to be messy here, but it's a fact that Hollywood has gone way out of its way to avoid presenting FBA talent in popular media. We have plenty of talent across the board to produce and portray our icons. There's absolutely no excuse to keep constantly going to anyone and everyone else, except that this is what the white media has always done. Sidney Poitier was not from our lineage, but the white media made it a point to push him as the first major respectable Black actor. That's what they wanted to make him into, precisely because of the fact that he came from abroad. That's no accident. When they keep doing that over and over again, it's meant to push the lie that, well, there's just no FBA talent good enough to be on screen as FBA people, and then you see how these foreigners talk and what they say and do. And you realize this was the point. Since we don't get out there and make fools of ourselves and invalidate our history and our experience and the evil of white supremacy, they instead hire some carpetbaggers to do it for them. And that's the reason why we have foreign flags who love to try to tell us that we have no history and that we don't really have a culture. Meanwhile, they're the ones imitating everything we do and trying to legitimize people like Cynthia Erivo masquerading as our historical figures. So the first part of pushing back against that is to push back personally. Document your own journey. Learn about the people that you come from. One of the good things that came out of Alex Haley's Roots is that it started a real drive for Black people in particular to begin doing deep genealogy. This was back in the 1970s, mind you. You didn't have to wait for some white website to do it for you. Black folks were doing it 50 years ago. Any serious discussion about FBA history ought to start there. It ought to start with you. And as you dig into your own past and begin to document it and to make sure that there's ways for future generations to be able to see what it was that you had done, what it was that you had to do in your walk of life, you're also going to start digging into your own family history and gaining a deeper understanding of that. As you start to unearth those jewels and gold pieces of the past, you'll see that your understanding of history begins to grow exponentially. That's what Black history actually is. It's a living, breathing thing. But you got to make sure to breathe life into it. We have a history, all right. In fact, our history is the most inspired account of a people who began the longest lasting, most sustained, significant freedom struggle in human history. And look what we have done as a completely beleaguered and oppressed people under these circumstances. We came to the point that we define the very society that is oppressing us, and we have spread our name, our influence, and our reputation throughout the world, with other people trying to imitate us when it comes time to either fight for their freedom or to assert their basic identity. Everybody looks to us for that. We are a unique people. Talking about your ancestors and your forebears and the people who contributed to your culture and your history, that's crucial and important because that's how you literally tell the world what you're made of. And knowing your history is a key component of self-affirmation. It demonstrates that you understand the world that you live in and your place in it. That's important if you're expecting to change your place in it. We are a peculiar people. And when I say peculiar, I mean it in the biblical sense. We are a people apart. We're built differently. And we shouldn't be bashful about saying it. If the rest of the diaspora had taken our lead, then things would be very different today. We extended the hand to everyone else. We invited them all to join with us. And they spat in our faces, told us they were better than us, and that all the racism and evils that we railed against, well, that didn't really exist. Instead of trying to be a unique people, they were trying to find ways to assimilate to a dominant society that hated them, and a lot of them just couldn't even tell the difference or didn't care. That's why today they're singing a different tune. They're proving why we became the singularly significant people that we are. Everyone else had every chance there was to graft themselves onto the tree of fire and empowerment that we represent. But they refused, and they said that they didn't want to be part of our history. In fact, a number of them said that we didn't even have a history. And that's the reason why we're showing everyone that we defied white supremacy, and we will defy anyone else who tries to disrespect us. We have titans and giants in our history. You have titans and giants in your history. We're not supposed to be depending on the institutions and the apparatuses of our enemies to teach us our history. All they'll do at best, and I put best in quotes, is to hideously distort and edit our history so as to leave out their own crimes. Or at worst, they'll outright lie about it and try to ban it altogether. That is, if we make the mistake of depending on them. The reason the asinine antics of the white right in Florida and Texas didn't scare me was because I understood why they were passing laws to single us out to be erased from the history books. Because the 1619 Project terrifies them. And even then, the 1619 Project alone wasn't what had them shook. It was that the 1619 Project just so happened to come on the heels of the reparations movement that had begun at the black grassroots. So, publicizing how the American economy is based on chattel slavery naturally leads to a common sense conversation of what can be done about that, and that leads directly to a conversation, or rather argument, about reparations, except where the black grassroots are concerned, there is no argument. This is a historical debt. It is owed. But they thought that by banning black history, they were effectively erasing the conversation altogether. Well, that's only true if the people you're trying to erase depend on the institutions of their enemies, instead of doing what any group with pride in themselves does, and that is to teach your history yourself. Otherwise, you wind up with some clown-like joke read trying to downplay the harm that's been done to us and trying to whitewash white racism. Or you wind up with Skip Gates doing his mockumentaries or some morning FM radio bootlick miseducating you. When I saw that segment that ABC did on FBA History Month, one of the things that I wished had been mentioned as a resource to learn about our history would have been a mention of the Hidden History Museum. Why? Because it's the only brick-and-mortar historical venue that addresses and celebrates our history by name. If you're going to start the process of establishing institutions, then you got to make sure you understand which ones are important to you because they're the ones that actually promote your interests. I'm sure that everyone's heard that old saying that you teach people how to treat you. Well, the opposite is also true. You do not want other people calling themselves teaching you how you're supposed to be treated. You're supposed to be spelling that out for yourself. So this is something that I want to make sure that everybody keeps in mind as this Black History Month continues. We want to make sure that it's crystal clear precisely who it is that we're talking about when we say Black history. We're not talking about the history of the world. We're not talking about foreign history. We're talking about the history that we made right here. And that's something that a lot of these immigrants do not like because they have to be pointing to things that came outside the United States, mainly because of the fact that they were not the ones who established the culture of the country. They were not the foundation of the culture. And that bothers them, but instead of them being bothered by it, why don't they just do what we did, which is to actually stand in their own power, stand up for themselves, and declare who they are? But that's the problem. When you're trying to be white supremacist adjacent, when you're looking for a comfortable place under white supremacy instead of fighting it, how are you going to have an identity of your own? You're trying to find a way to be co-opted by the dominant society, and a lot of these other groups, in fact, all of these other groups, they've succeeded at that. They have become auxiliaries of the dominant society. But at the end of the day, they know that they're not part of the team, no matter how much they may dream about it. We live in truth. That truth is not always pleasant. That truth is not always comfortable, but it is real. And that's the reason why we stand on it. And that's the reason why the rest of the world, they hate us because of the irresistible reality and truth that we actually stand for. They look at us and they see all of the integrity and they also see the fortitude that too many of them know that they don't have. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with pointing to our history and letting everybody know, yes, we are exactly who and what you think we are. As Dr. King once said, when the history books are written in the future, somebody will have to say there lived a race of people, a black people who had the moral courage to stand up for their rights, and thereby they injected a new meaning into the veins of history and of civilization. Those words come from Dr. King's Montgomery bus boycott in 1955. See, that's part of the real Dr. King that the white media doesn't tell you about. He wasn't sitting here talking about, it's going to be everybody out there. It's going to be black people and white people. No, he just said, let the world say that there lived a race of people, a black people, who injected new meaning into the veins of history and of civilization. Yeah, he specified his people. He wasn't sitting there saying, well, let's make sure we mention everyone. Well, it's not everybody who's oppressing us. It's not everyone who's standing in the way of justice. And it's not everybody who's fighting for justice. We do ourselves no favors by trying to basically water down the message so as not to make everybody who's been complicit in our oppression feel uncomfortable. No, the job of the righteous is not to make sure that the people who are wrong are comfortable. Our job is to make them as uncomfortable as possible until we eventually throw them out of power altogether. And I agree with Dr. King when he says that somebody will have to say who and what we are and what we have done. Somebody should say that. And that somebody should be us. As I've always taught you, history is the collective memory of a people, and it's crucially important that history be told accurately. So that being the case, history is also too important to be left up to just anyone. We should be writing our own history. It's our duty and our responsibility. Not just this month, but every month. Because the story of our people is far from over. In fact, it's only just begun. Everybody knows the old saying about how those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Well, in our case, we understand that it's our sacred obligation to remember our history, to teach it to future generations, and to learn from it. Not to be having other people miseducating us about it or claiming that they're going to teach us about it, but that we are the ones who will teach the world. Because if the past has taught us and the world anything, it's that when it comes to knowing what's the right side of history, the smart money is on us. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. John Harvin, Neil Saphir, DeepI904, Kenneth Johnson, and Krishan Span. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.